this is what most people do ingest on average throughout the day.
Right. 10 times what's actually recommended. There's a dent at the top of her brain, an area in the basal ganglia called the nucleus accumbens, sort of like the little pleasure button in the brain.
If you're addicted to sugar, it's sort of like you're in an abusive relationship.
Well, tonight we're talking about addictive ingredients in food. Now, Kelsey says she's binge eating as a coping mechanism.
I've been struggling with food for 7 years now. The type of food that I normally binge on is more processed and like fast food and takeout. I'm very addicted to donuts. I try really hard to like control it. Food delivery apps can be such a struggle because it's so easy to just like press add to cart, add to cart, add to cart. McDonald's is one of my go-tos. So I get like a Big Mac meal, large, so a large fry, large Sprite, Big Mac, 10-piece chicken nugget, McChicken, a McFlurry, some cookies.
Last night was kind of a rough night. I made myself so sick from eating that I threw up.
The main component of binge eating is feeling out of control, like you can't stop yourself, normally doing it in secret. There's a lot of shame around it. And you feel like so full after Thanksgiving dinner. Like that's basically how after a binge is, sometimes worse. It just makes me feel really bad and, I want to stop. And sometimes I do feel like, am I going to always, struggle with this?
Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course.
What do you think about the fact that Kelly is saying that these foods that you have trouble putting down, staying away from, that you're binging on, are in fact scientifically designed to create just that effect on you?
Yeah, I think it's been really eye-opening just hearing all of this. And it makes me feel like, I guess, not relieved in a way, but just like, I know that it's my fault because I choose to put the foods in my mouth, but at the same time, it makes me feel like more understood.
Okay, well,
sorry.
Let me say something to you that I think is going to be important going forward.
Yeah.
You just said, it's my fault. And I think words are very powerful. And so I just have to stop you to talk about this in the middle of this whole thing.
Yeah.
There's a difference between fault and responsibility. Fault implies intent, that you did something on purpose. It's like if I go over and take a hammer and hit that camera and it breaks, then that's my fault. If I'm walking past it and bump it, but it was not my intent to do so and it breaks, then am I responsible for its being broken? Yes, but I'm not at fault because it wasn't my intent. So you say, yes, I'm putting the food in my mouth and all, but is it your intent to make yourself unhealthy? Is it intent to make yourself obese? Is it intent to put yourself in a compromised position? And I would argue that that's not your intent.
No.
And if in fact, this entire food complex, this entire beverage complex has been exploiting you by putting ingredients in there that makes your brain signal you that you need to keep doing this and keep doing this and keep doing this to get a high, to get satisfaction, to get satiety, then you've been victimized in part by that.
Yeah.
Fair statement?
100% fair. I just want to thank you for having the courage to speak out. There was a systemic poisoning happening, and we have to realize that.
Well, how did you justify it to yourself when you were out bribing agencies and scientists?
Great question. Nobody behind closed doors is saying that they're evil or saying stuff like that. It's about protecting lower income folks' ability to get their calories, their cheap calories. For the pharmaceutical industry, which is not stopping this epidemic of foodborne illnesses, but profiting from it. It's, we need to get people access to drugs. You can always justify things. And that is absolutely what's happening in DC and in these companies.
Well, you had to know. I mean, if you're taking money to the NAACP to call people racist for talking about a tax, or you're carrying money to scientists somewhere for a food company, they didn't ask you to do that on the town square.
It is impossible to explain to you how normalized things are. I think we all work for large companies. Many of us work for the pharmaceutical industry. Many friends from from Harvard Business School or go into the pharmaceutical industry, work for Coke, work for Pepsi. These companies are doing evil, and there is an amazing invisible hand that's convincing a lot of good people to do bad things. And I will say, being in those rooms at the NAACP, we were talking about protecting choice for lower income kids. I did not even fully realize how evil what we were doing was.
So you drank the addictive Kool-Aid.
100%. And that's, I think, what's happening systemically. Healthcare is the largest and fastest growing industry in the country. And the moment you are empowered, the moment a child learns metabolically healthy habits, and doesn't go on Ozempic, doesn't go on statins, doesn't go on SSRIs, doesn't go on metformin, which is being prescribed like candy in high schools right now. The moment that happens and they wake up, that's not a profitable patient. And there is trillions of dollars of incentives right now to prevent us from waking up.
Well, I'm all about waking up.
If you're addicted to sugar, it's sort of like you're in an abusive relationship. Sugar is addictive, it's pro-inflammatory, it steals, hijacks your brain to need it in order for you to feel normal. I want you to begin to think of it as the enemy. It's really one of the weapons of mass destruction when it comes to your health. If you're looking at that cupcake and go, oh, I wish I had it, we got to work on your mindset.
That was Dr. Daniel Aon. He's an award-winning researcher and brain imaging pioneer with the world's largest database of brain scans for psychiatry, totaling more than 250,000 SPECT scans on patients from 155 countries. Now, Dr. Aon says that on average, Americans consume 10 times more sugar than the lowest reasonable recommended intake. Now, Dr. Aon, this is a dangerous chemical with regard to brain functioning, certainly in excessive amounts. True?
Absolutely. And it's pro-inflammatory, and we think chronic inflammation is a major cause of cancer, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, and depression. It's addictive. In some studies with rats, more addictive than cocaine. And once you start, you can't stop. And so it hijacks your pleasure centers. And if you wear out the pleasure centers in your brain, now you're not only at risk for addiction, you're at risk for depression. You're at risk for demotivation.
Right. And this may actually play a big role in dementia. We're starting to see that it's kind of type 3 diabetes may actually play a role in dementia.
There are 11 major risk factors for dementia. If you're overweight or you have high blood sugar, you have 7 of the 11. You have decreased blood flow to the brain. You have inflammation. It changes your hormones in a negative way. This is something we can solve, and we have to get the right mindset and read labels, because I don't want anybody hijacking me or the people I love.
You have some things for us to look at.
Right. An area in the basal ganglia called the nucleus accumbens, sort of like the little pleasure button in the brain. And normally it's active, but when it gets hit with sugar or cocaine or pornography, that activates and we feel good. But the problem is if you hit it too much or too often, you begin to wear it out, and then you need more and more to feel anything at all.
Mm-hmm. And what usually happens, certainly with addicts, is they keep chasing that high. They keep going after it more and more. And that's the whole idea, right? That's why we're saying if you're binging on these foods, you're looking for that same satisfaction that you may have gotten much earlier before.
Let me add to that, because over time, they're not looking for the high, they're looking to stop feeling awful. And the problem is, the more they do it, the more worn out it becomes. But the good news is if they get on the right program and nourish their brain, it's easier to break this.
Well, what happens on the withdrawal that we're seeing up here when they come down off of this?
So then what you see in that area of the basal ganglia, it's cold, it's low, inactivity. So chronically now, they feel bad. And that sets them up for a lifetime of struggle.
Right. And this is something that's chronic.
And then they end up on psychiatric medication. And most doctors don't talk about the answer is, let's get your food right. Let's get you to exercise.
Dr. Aon, founder of Aon Clinics, which has the world's largest database of brain scans for psychiatry, worked with Kelsey before taping to see how her fast food addiction and binge eating has affected her brain. I don't want to gloss over what I just said. He has the largest database on the planet. When you've got such a database, you have something to compare it to. So you can see where somebody falls. Are they at the first percentile? Are they in the middle? Are they way out at the ends? It gives you an idea of where you fall and gives you an idea of what needs to be done. What did you find?
So if you look at the left image, there's a dent at the top of her brain, which is probably one of the physical accidents. But we also see low activity in the front part of the brain. And that's so important because the prefrontal cortex is involved with things like forethought, judgment, impulse control, organization, planning, empathy. And yours is sleepy, again, I think, from the trauma, the physical trauma. And then if
you've had some car wrecks, correct?
Yes.
And if you asked me, you said, hey, Daniel, what's the single most important thing you've learned from 250,000 scans? Mild traumatic brain injury ruins people's lives, and nobody knows about it because psychiatrists are the only medical doctors who never look at the organ they treat. I mean, think about that. If we look at the image on the right, compared to healthy, your emotional brain looks like a diamond, and the arrow's pointing to the top of the diamond. That goes with emotional trauma. And that area right at the top is called the anterior cingulate gyrus, big term. It's the brain's gear shifter. And it works too hard, you tend to get stuck on things. You get the same thought in your head over and over again. It's classic what I see in binge eating disorders. And so the goal is calm down the cingulate, pop up your frontal lobes, and then love your brain. So whenever you go to make a decision, just ask yourself this one question. This is good for my brain or bad for it, right?
Yeah, and you're ingesting a lot of sugar, which is not loving your brain, right?
It's not loving your brain. It's hating your brain.
Why don't we get up and go to this so you can tell us what we're looking at here. This is the amount of sugar that most people would normally be expected to ingest throughout the day.
Right.
This is what most people do ingest on average throughout the day.
Right. 10 times what's actually recommended.
Yeah, okay. And this is what people typically ingest in a month.
Correct.
Okay. Now, this is just a regular can of soda, and it is almost a daily's recommended. This is a 20 ounce.
22 ounce.
And that exceeds the daily amount substantially. This is 65 grams, recommended is 50 max, and this is 65. You go up to this size, and you're talking about 135. You go up to this big size, 234 grams. This is just what they're drinking. This doesn't have anything to do with what they're eating, right? This is no donuts. This is no cookies. This is no cake. You find sugar in practically everything, right?
Yeah. Everything. And there are 40 different names for sugar. And so when people read the label, they're meant to confuse you. So high fructose corn syrup, people go, oh, probably shouldn't have that. But fruit nectar, it's like, oh, well, that sounds good for me. Or fruit juice concentrate, well, that must be good for you. And fruit juice is not good for you because it's loaded with sugar.
Look at this. You got brown sugar, corn sweetener, lactose, cane crystals, honey, cane sugar, dextrin, corn syrup, fruit juice content, crystal dextrose, apple juice concentrate, agave nectar. These are just all other names for sugar, right?
Other names for sugar. And that's why we are fatter and sicker than we've ever been in human history.
Two other quick points, Dr. Phil. The amount of sugar here is about the sugar an average child ate an entire year just 100 years ago. So we are absolutely weaponizing this against kids. The last thing I'll say, I just would impress this. This is the wrong recommended amount of sugar. The USDA does not have a recommended amount of cigarettes. They don't have a recommended amount of alcohol for people to drink. We should not be recommending what, by all accounts, from every DSM addiction and drug ranking, classifies as a drug, no nutritional benefit. We do not need added sugar, and I think it's really shameful, again, that we recommend this to kids.
That's why you say an orange is okay, orange juice, not okay.
Whenever you unwrap sugar from its fiber source, it turns toxic in your body. We haven't talked about fatty liver, but fatty liver is skyrocketed in children. It's like you think of fatty liver with alcoholics, but it is now becoming another epidemic.